You can go as big as you want.
That's terrifying. I'm like,
there's actually an entire mountain you can get speed from.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
So. Welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I am your host, Nils Mindnich, and this is the Backcountry Podcast, a show aimed towards providing insight on the outdoor industry by interviewing people who work within it. Now, for today's episode, we have a guest that I'm super stoked to catch up with, Melissa Riitano. Melissa, how you doing?
Doing great. No complaints this winter.
Nice.
No complaints at all.
Nice. Melissa is a professional snowboarder, a backcountry athlete. Alongside, she is also a talented photographer, surfer, a climber, and above all else, she's super rad, and I'm excited for today's conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So to kind of maybe start at like a broader scale for today's topic, it seems like you have a lot of passions, if I'm not mistaken.
A lot. Too many sometimes.
And it also seems like you've done a really good job at finding success within those passions, and I'm kind of just curious, like, what came first? Like, were you a photographer and then you got into snowboarding? Was it snowboarding, then photography, or did it all happen at once?
When I was younger, I always had like a camera in my hand. I always liked having a disposable camera in my hand, and got into high school, loved photography, just like took all the classes I could. And around the same time I started snowboarding, it was just like the best outlet to kind of like relieve stress and just be happy. And then I realized I really liked it and started doing competitions, just local around the hill, nothing major.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, this is so fun. I didn't think much of it, and I wanted to go to college to be like a journalist and photographer, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll work for Nat Geo someday. That was like my goal. And then I'm like, I'll just take a year off and like actually rewind a little. I graduated high school early, moved to Tahoe, and then kind of fell deeper in love with snowboarding and decided that maybe the school route wasn't for me. Okay,
totally. So like where did you grow up initially then?
I grew up in Montana.
Okay.
Yeah, initially.
Yeah. All right, yeah, definitely a snowy place.
Very snowy.
And then with your transition to Tahoe, were you still taking photos during that time period, just like recreationally, or?
A little bit. I just would go like disposable camera. That was kind of my mode, and I had like later got a digital camera and just took pictures but I didn't really think much of it. I just loved taking pictures.
Yeah.
It was kind of like coincided with each other. We'd go to all these beautiful places and like just get to take pictures. I feel like it was easy in a way.
Oh, that's so cool. That's sick. I mean, yeah, I think for myself, for example, I have like a hard time figuring out maybe when it's time to like take photos, or when it might be time to like try to take video or focus on, capturing something, or then still like be able to let go and enjoy snowboarding. Has that kind of been like a natural balance for you to find, or especially now, like since you've sort of like found a career in both of these avenues, is it more thought put into like what day is going to be for what practice?
Usually more intentional. Like it's like I'll have to plan out photography stuff a little bit more. Like if I'm shooting with somebody, I'll just like plan the date, and that'll be kind of the focus. So it'll be like more intentional. But other times it's not intentional. It's like I'll bring a camera out to the backcountry and just like shoot a portrait of my friends, or like shoot a portrait or like the scenery just wherever I'm at. Yeah. And it just feels really natural. Like I'm here, and like I've talked to other people about photography, and they say the hardest thing is like being around talent. And we're so lucky to be around so many talented people. So it's really easy to capture. Like I feel like my job is done already.
To a degree. And having spent that time in Tahoe, were you primarily riding when you first moved there? And like you said you went there to go to school, or it was like a gap year?
It was a gap year. So I graduated high school early and just kind of like set out in the road in my crappy Subaru. Okay. And then just kind of road trip around myself. Went to Colorado, lived in California for a short bit, went back to Colorado, and then went home to Montana, and then liked Colorado. Wow. So I moved to Colorado for the season.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's a lot of bouncing around. And I want to hear a little bit more about this Subaru, because I've heard about it, and it seemed like it was maybe bit of a personality during that time period of your life.
Yeah.
Could you kind of enlighten us a little bit more on the old Subie?
I feel like people got more excited to see my Subaru than me sometimes. They're like, how is this still running? Like, I bought it for $250 when I was still in high school, and it was like best purchase I'll ever make of my life, and had a dent in every corner. It was a Subaru, like I think it was a 96, 93 Subaru Impreza Sport, like the classic like teal green color you see everywhere. Yes. And his name was Jiminy Crickets, Jiminy for short. So I'd pull up and I'd pick up my friend in this like beater, and they'd be like, Jiminy, and I'm like, I know, still going. But we road trip everywhere for about like 9 years. Like we'd go
9 years.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I never had an issue. Never had one issue.
That's incredible.
I swear, Jiminy ran off of love. He didn't need oil, like barely gas. At least my younger self was telling me I didn't need oil.
Good for Jiminy. Oh my God. And it was sort of, I mean, in that time period, it seemed like you started to really pursue snowboarding a little bit more. What did that path kind of look like? And at the same time, were you still doing photography, or did you kind of stick directly to snowboarding and try to like say, you know, was there a moment that you're like, oh, I want to be a pro snowboarder?
It took me a while to kind of have that come to fruition. I was just like,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just bopping around doing this thing, and I think it was a confidence thing, being like, I didn't want to say it out loud, being like, I want to be a pro snowboarder. I was just like, I like this a lot, and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But there was a moment when I got really badly injured that it kind of clicked, that I'm like, oh, I really want to do this. Like, I was so fired up to get healthy again, and from there it was just like, this is what I want to do. I want to do this.
Oh, that's cool.
Photography was definitely like, and to the second part, was definitely like on the back burner. I put kind of all my focus into snowboarding, and would just take photos with my iPhone still, and because that's what I had. I didn't have money for an expensive camera, so I would just take photos with that and play around, and I think that's the best way to learn.
Totally. Yeah.
The biggest thing is composition. Doesn't matter what equipment you have. It's like, if you can create like a beautiful composition, that's, I think, the most important part.
Dang. Yeah, I should take some notes on that, maybe.
Yeah, you don't need a nice camera. iPhone's great. I actually, like, my favorite photo I've ever taken, I got like this used digital camera at Acme here in Salt Lake.
Okay, yeah.
For like $400. It was just like this digital camera, and I took one of my all-time favorite photos on it still.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the photo?
It was an athlete. His name was Corey Woltering. It was just this portrait we took, and I was working another job, and I just like always just carry my camera, because why not? And it's just like little tiny digital camera, and it was just like the perfect moment.
Oh, cool.
Sometimes you just see it, you feel it, and you're just like, this is it.
That's so cool, right? Like I've definitely had that a couple of times, you know, that it just, the like opportunity or the moment, you didn't even expect it was there, and it like presents itself, and you end up with like an image, or, you know, more so on my end, maybe an experience that like you're like, whoa, that was so sick. I did not think that, you know, the outcome would be this fulfilling.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of want, you briefly touched on it, and I sort of want to like get into it a little bit more. You're saying that it seemed like maybe you didn't see yourself as a pro snowboarder, and then you had this injury, and it's almost like in sports psychology, there's sort of this aspect of like, you give yourself permission to win or something, right? And you kind of like, it sounds like maybe you had a transition like that you made, that you kind of accepted and decided, okay, yes, I can do this. I'm going to like, and then have this external approach to it.
Yeah, I think that was one piece of the puzzle, was like starting to allow myself to see myself in this role or this career. Before I would be kind of too afraid to admit that I wanted this so badly, and I just didn't know what it would look like, if I'd be a contest, I'd be film. That was definitely a big piece of gaining the confidence to admit that I wanted to do this as a career.
Totally. You know, after your injury, how did that kind of start to like take place? Like, what did that look like?
Oh man, I think swallowing a lot of hard truths about myself.
Okay.
like looking really hard at yourself.
Elaborate on that?
Yeah. Like, oh my God, yeah.
Could you use more words?
Yes. So yeah, so long story short, I shattered my kneecap in November. So it was the very beginning of the season. And I was devastated. I was so devastated. I had to get surgery. And that was the first big injury I'd ever had. It had minor ones, but I would just spend a lot of time alone, sitting on the couch with my roommate's dog.
Okay.
Became best friends. But I was living in Utah at the time, and I didn't know a lot of people yet, so I didn't have a lot of people to reach out to for support. So it was just like a true, I am alone with my thoughts.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It was a lot, and I kind of took it in a constructive way. It definitely went down like the wormhole of kind of beating myself up really hard and being like, I don't like this about myself, I don't like this about myself. But then I started getting into more psychology books and being like, I can change this. That's like the cool thing. Like,
yeah.
I now know what I want to work on, and I'm going to work on it.
That's cool.
That's a big turning point.
That's cool. I think for a lot of people, you have a setback like that or like an injury or something, and it's pretty easy just to kind of get beaten down from it, and maybe you physically recover, but to kind of put your best foot forward and take like a strong initiative with your mindset is, it's like, it's no easy feat.
No, it's not. Especially looking at the parts of yourself
that
aren't necessarily great. We all have them.
Yeah.
But just like being truly honest with yourself. You don't have to tell anybody else, but if you can be honest with yourself, like that's when I feel like you start to like move forward from something like that.
Yeah.
And then I got really fired up after that. I was just like, all right, let's go. And I'm like, okay.
Sick.
And I gave myself 1 year. I'm like, okay, you suck at snowboarding. Let's face the facts. You can do like 3 tricks. Okay. And so my goal was get better at snowboarding. That was priority number 1. While doing that, priority number 2 is to figure out which athlete you want to be. Do you want to do contests or do you want to film? And those are kind of like the 2 kind of big decisions you can make as like an athlete in snowboarding, I would say.
Yeah.
And for me, like, rails really came to fruition that whole year. I just spent the time like putting in the work, learning tricks, learning about myself, and then I decided I want to be a film athlete because I realized I absolutely hated competitions so much.
Fair enough. I mean, I think everyone's had stints at competitions, and if you're able to like find success within the filming, it's typically the flexibility and the outlet can be a little bit more comforting, right? Compared to like the rigid aspects you might find in the competitive space.
Yeah, I respect all those athletes so much.
That's crazy.
I don't want to like gale force winds. They're like, all right, you're dropping. You're like, no, I'm not.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's the last thing I want to do.
So with that, do you feel like your time with your injury, I guess, kind of set you up to like build up this mental toughness that then kind of catapulted your progress through snowboarding? Because I look at your riding and I would say that you have super solid fundamentals. The kids like to call it solid fundies, if you will. Solid fundies. Were you really focused just on the quality of your riding, or are you trying to get straight into pursuing filming, right?
Quality of my riding was number 1. I really humbled myself and took a full step back to square one. Like, I remember I like relearned how to like pop off a jump. I learned how to like spin a half cab, which I'd never done before because my tricks were back 3 and like a 360 off a rail. Those were like my tricks. But I just started from square one. I'm like, okay, what do we have to do to get better again? We have to actually learn how to do stuff from square one. Mm-hmm. So it was really humbling to like thinking I was here to moving back here.
Yep.
But it, like making all these like small building blocks ended up kind of like steadily built up the skills I needed.
Yeah, right. Like being honest with yourself and kind of creating that solid foundation to actually have something to build on and like go where you want to go next. And you seem like you have such like a pretty like methodical, analytical mind. Like there's an easy way for you, and maybe it wasn't always easy. I guess that could be the first question, right? Like, have you had an easy time trying to separate, what we'll call it like ego, sense of self versus goals, objectives, maybe like pursuits? And like, has that always been how you operate, or was there like a transition that you made at some point?
I feel like it's always a constant ebb and flow. Even now, I feel like sometimes maybe my ego takes control, being like, you should be better than this. And other times you're like, oh, let's just take a step back and like, what do you actually need to work on, instead of being like, you should know how to do this. But yeah, I think I've started to become more methodical. Like, I would watch people do tricks and I would break them down.
Oh, okay,
like, oh, like doing a 270 onto a rail, you're like, you can relate it to like, oh, they're just doing a board slide, but it's a more difficult way to get onto a board slide. Or certain tricks, you're like, oh, it's this exact same trick, it's just a slightly different approach to get on.
Yeah.
I think I had a weird way of thinking about it.
No.
Broke it away in my brain.
That's awesome. I feel like that's such a valuable way to think about it, because so often, myself included, you see so many riders are just like athletes, professionals, people at work or whatever, you know, they like, maybe you think you know how to approach the problem, but you might not look at like the big picture, or you might get overwhelmed with the big picture, right? You see like you see the finished product, you see the 270 onto the rail, or the 1080 or whatever, right? And like, it becomes super overwhelming, but that's like so cool, your ability, right, to be able to kind of break these things down and almost normalize like the process. And like, it's, you know, it kind of makes me think, do you apply that to the other aspects of your life right now? Because it seems like besides being a solid snowboarder, you know, you're kind of putting so much more into the everyday outside of that. Do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit?
It's like, it's all kind of building blocks, like.
Totally. Let's talk about photography first, and then we can kind of go into like some of the other things you're doing outside of snowboarding.
One aspect, I watch a lot of YouTube.
Okay.
That helps.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
But it's all building blocks as far as like learning, like just remembering to constantly be learning. Like, there's no way you can know everything about everything, or you
Some
can know
people
a
might
lot.
argue otherwise. But it's good that you don't.
I always want to, like, everybody's opinions are valid. You can always learn more in any field you're in. Like, it surprise you, like, because sometimes you forget about things. I do apply a lot of that to what I'm doing now, like kind of taking steps approach, because it really can get overwhelming, and I definitely still feel those overwhelming times, being like, oh my gosh, I want to get here in life, or I want to like achieve X, but it feels like I'm versing a mountain, but like trying to zoom out a little, and take it step by step. Like with photography, being like, I occasionally make money with photography, not fully yet, but I love doing it, and that I could see maybe being something I pursue. Like, if snowboarding kind of dies off at some point in my life, I would love to pursue that even harder and like more ferociously.
Yeah, totally.
But it's the same principle, like just being patient with yourself and like analyzing your stuff, asking questions from your peers or people that you trust, or experts. And that's kind of like where my building blocks come in with. With learning that, it's like instead of relating it to a trick, it's just like relating it to other people's work and seeing their opinion on it.
Another thing, like outside from photography, you've been working at Kodiak Cakes during the off season. How did that come about? It seems sick. First, I guess let's just start, like, where did that come about?
Very long story short, my friend Micah worked there, and they needed somebody for an internship to be like a PA, somebody to help with production and just be there on set as extra hands. And I loved it, so like it worked out really well, and they wanted me to work there full time through the winter, and I'm like, no, I gotta go, sorry. But they liked what I did so much. Like, I got really good at food styling. I cook a lot in my personal life, so I was naturally drawn to like making pancakes look really pretty and doing other stuff like that. Totally, It just really came easy for me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll make this beautiful stack of pancakes and these berries where they're supposed to be.
Totally, why not?
And that led to like me working there next summer. They like couldn't find anybody, so they're like, do you want to come back? And I'm like, I can only come back for the summer. And they let me do it.
Cool.
Which was really cool.
Dang, that's sweet.
Love Kodiak Cakes so much. Like, as a company, the product.
Sick.
Yeah, I would do a lot there. I would do some production stuff, like hire models, locations, set up,
whoa.
like get shoots kind of squared away. And
so way more like sort of back end, right? Like back end input then.
Yeah, back end input and also front end input, like helping out with art direction on the set sometimes, and like making all the food once again. Like I'd always be like, I loved doing that.
Yeah.
Just making the food look really tasty.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that story. That's pretty sweet to hear. It kind of, so to bring it back to snowboarding for a little bit, you know, we started talking about how you have this, right, like analytical, methodical approach, and Kodiak Cakes, right, like helping out with back end stuff. Has that helped you out in snowboarding as well, maybe in areas like product development or being able to put in input within the snowboard brands you work with?
Yeah, I think completely has helped. I think another thing, adding to building my confidence, that was like being not afraid to speak up about like things that I see that could be different.
Okay.
It's really helped my confidence in that, and just being like, oh, they want to hear this feedback. Like it's important to hear this feedback. So it's made me not afraid to like give feedback on things that I think could be improved or things that I like. Mm-hmm. It's definitely helped.
Mm-hmm. Totally, yeah. And from like a rider's perspective, you can get really wrapped up just with like the day-to-day, I'm going to focus on riding, but then actually trying to make space and create time to communicate improvements or ideas with the product team, for example, can go such a long ways. And, you know, I think helps everyone create and develop like a better experience. And I was just curious if maybe you could elaborate. I know you've been recently on the Backcountry program, and what's that looked like from the like product development side?
It's been amazing, honestly, right off the bat. Like right when I got on, we did a women's summit with a few of the other women on the team, and we got to talk about like how the gear functions like out when we're riding, like what we like about it, what we think could be improved, what colors we like, because you know color is important.
Color's important. Aesthetic goes a long way. Oh yeah.
But the fits, like the big thing is like feeling comfortable and having enough room to like move, and the jackets aren't restricting, which I think Backcountry does an insanely good job at. Like all the women on the design team crush it, from like fabric sourcing to like the fits, like everything fits appropriately. But it's so nice to have input on like what we as athletes are looking for out of our gear, because we're really kind of putting it through the ringer all year.
I know, right? Like
snowmobiling, touring, exactly. Especially snowmobiling.
Yeah, I know. I want to talk about snowmobiling because I've seen you on a sled more recently, and previously. You've had this arc, right, in snowboarding. You started out when you were younger with contests, and then you kind of went into filming rails for a period of time, and then now you're sledding, which I feel like is essentially like the step before hellying in Alaska. It's like you've gone pretty far as how you can get into backcountry snowboarding. Like, how did that transition kind of take place immediately, or were you always drawn to the backcountry? What did that path look like for you?
I've always been drawn to nature, so that was kind of like a big key. And starting to realize that I wasn't as happy traveling in cities, like hitting rails, and because I love the whole rest of the process, but as soon as I would get out in the mountains, I'd be like a breath of fresh air. So in some ways it seemed like a quick transition, but in other ways it didn't. Like the past couple of years I've been taking a lot of avalanche courses and doing a course of bald face that you've done the risk maturity, like learning first aid, and I'm like every step I've taken, I'm like I just feel like really deep down that I'm like, this is what I want to do so badly. And last year was the year that I went to Whistler for the first time and borrowed some friends' sleds, and I was like, oh gosh, this is it. This is what I want to do. And
what'd you think of sledding?
I actually liked it right off the bat. I don't know why. Like
that's good. That's a very good thing.
I don't know why. I was just like, I'd get stuck and I'd be like, oh well, I gotta flip it over. Like we all get stuck, and I did pretty good. Like I was like, knock on wood, like doing okay. I should say, like for a complete beginner. Like we were going to some kind of crazy places, and I made it.
Whistler's crazy.
Whistler is nuts. Like
it's big.
It's very big. You just be like staring up this hill, like full of fresh snow, and you're like, oh gosh. Like, yeah. I don't want to do this.
I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe like it seems your general mindset and your approach to a lot of the things you do as well. It appears you have your shit together. You like take cadence into a lot of these objectives, and was snowmobiling kind of the same approach? Like you were just saying, you'd like get stuck and be like, oh no. Like I remember when I first went sledding, I was shaking trying to load my sled onto my truck, and then I like aired it and like slammed it and broke my back window. I was just like terrified for years. So like how do you do that?
I had really great people to start out with, honestly. Like Amanda Hankinson was the first one to take me out, and we went really slow for the first day. Like we just went up the trail, practiced riding the trail, and I would hit like a little bump and just tip over, and she would just laugh. And I think making it fun and approachable and not so serious right off the bat made it really fun and not as intimidating. I was still shaking. Like anytime we would get to a zone in Whistler, we'd be like at the top of something like, okay, you ready to ride? I'm like, no, I'm not ready. Like I'm freaked out. Like
I need a moment.
I'm like, I'm still buzzing from getting here. But
oh man.
I think it'll get more normal, but
it does. I feel like it took me 3 or 4 years before I like was comfortable on a snowmobile.
Yeah, I think at time for sure.
Yeah, kind of like a mileage thing. And man, that's so cool. It's cool to hear your like perspective on how you approach a lot of things. And I was sort of curious, like, do you wish, it seems like you're psyched on pursuing snowboarding for a while, and do you have like other avenues you're sort of like focusing on as well at the moment, or how do you feel like your specialized approach is looking?
I'm putting all my energy into backcountry right now. Yeah. I'm not doing street right now. I'm taking a little break.
Yeah, cool.
See if I will go back to it, but I feel like for me to really learn something, I just have to dive full bore into it and like try and stay focused. Like I didn't do any rail jams this year, and I hit a rail yesterday.
Okay.
Or 2 days ago for the first time in a long time. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just fully putting all my energy into this, and it's working. Like I'm starting to feel more comfortable, and the more I feel more comfortable, I think the more my riding will start to reflect that. Because I'm like, I don't have to go crazy big this year. I just have to go with crazy style this year.
Yeah.
That was kind of my goal. And if I go do some big things, like great, but I'm just trying to like build up the confidence, and like I guess I have a process. I've never really thought about
laying it out. You kind of got a process.
I got a process. I didn't realize how much of a process it was.
So we're getting that.
I'm like, no, I want to go off this jump first to feel comfortable, because then if I go off this jump, then I can like spin it next time and actually pop and not be like scared. And
did you have like, was there a role model that sort of helped you with that, like with developing that process? Because I think that's great. It's something I wish I was able to do a bit easier, because typically I try to go to 0 to 100%.
Yeah.
But thinking long term, like it seems like you're thinking seasons upon seasons down the line to get to where you'd want to go. Is it like hard at times trying to balance that? Like, are you a frother, I suppose is what I'm asking.
At times, yes, I'm a frother, but I think like longevity, I kind of think about like, I think about the big picture a lot, probably too much at times, being like, okay, will I be excited to see myself do this when I'm 50 is kind of a question I ask myself a lot.
Okay, yeah.
And it doesn't matter what anybody else is thinking. I'm like, will I be happy with myself when I'm older? And that's kind of where I think my process kind of started to develop stronger the older I've gotten.
Yeah, right. Like, what do you, do you have like an ultimate goal you're working towards within backcountry riding, or are you just trying to take it one step at a time and sort of see where it takes you?
I definitely have some goals. I want to bring like the style I've kind of had in the streets to the backcountry, like kind of like jibby, flowy, like I like things right after another. Like If there's one hit and then another hit, like trying to butter after it or do a cool turn after it.
Yeah.
Kind of just making it look good, not necessarily like going back to not needing to do something very large, but doing something very well.
Yeah.
And just kind of expanding it outward instead of upward. Like some people, I feel like, are meant to really push progression up, and I kind of want to push progression like out and expand with like more style, and like there's a lot of stylish people out there, but I just want to like have a vision of what I could do, and it I'm like, I want to push it that way and more. Yeah. That's my current goal. Like I feel like that'll constantly evolve.
Oh man, it's interesting to hear, you know, because I would say my approach when I was younger was very vertical growth. Yeah. Right? Like that was kind of the space that I grew up in, and like the crews that I had sort of aligned myself with, and maybe I want to hear a little bit more about some of the people you get out with, because I know a few of the folks you get out with are like, A, they're super good fundamentalists, but B, they've also done a really good job of kind of not setting boundaries, but like setting goals as to, or setting an understanding in a landscape of, right, that more like, what did you call it? You called it horizontal growth,
I guess like, right? Outward.
Outward growth, right? So what's your crew?
This year I've been just kind of riding with a lot of different people. Like I don't have like a super solid crew. Naima I've been going out with a ton, so I feel like it's fun because we're both kind of learning together. Yeah. But I also like going out with people like you and Sage, where you guys are on like such a cool mode, and I'm like, wow, that's so sick. And I do want to it's like inspiring because I'm like, oh, I do want to get to that point. Like I really do. But yeah, other people I go out with my boyfriend a lot. He's great. Yeah. He's really awesome.
He's the man.
He's the man. He's really great. But he's like a big style guy too, and like really good fundamentals and popping. So I think just like really going out with people who are going to like fuel creativity and fuel things that I want to do, even if it's in the future. Like, just being around it, I'm like learning. Yeah.
That's really exciting to think about, you know, because we've found out that you have this methodical, analytical approach, right? which is a great way to like find progression. But with that, I think you can, some people find themselves like pigeonholing themselves and not having space for creativity. And is there a balance for you to still try, you know, have these like goals, objectives, and places you want to go, but still allow space for the creativity? Or does that come naturally?
I think it comes naturally when you see the terrain, honestly. Like, you're just like kind of working with like your imagination, what you see in the terrain. It could be like a line that follows like a shadow, and you're like just trying to like not, I guess my approach is not getting too wrapped up in what other people are expecting of me, and just like staying wrapped up in like what I would like to see myself doing. That might sound selfish, but
no, I think that's really important. Honestly, I'd like to hear more about that, because I feel like as snowboarders, right, you put so much weight on how other people are going to view what you're doing, right? But it sounds like maybe your approach is a little bit different than that.
It's gotten to be there, like the older I've gotten, because I used to be wrapped up in like, oh, what will other people think of this trick or this clip? And now I'm like, there's going to be people who love it, and there's going to be people who hate it, and it's fine. Yeah. Like I have no control over what they're going to think about what I'm doing. So I'm just going to do what's making me happy, and I'm so lucky to be able to do this. I may as well be happy.
Oh, that's incredible. No, I think that's really cool. Like, to be able to take that perspective on it, right? And not get wrapped up in not necessarily the politics, but maybe more so the scene and what maybe is cool versus not cool. And it's so easy to get caught up.
We've all been there for sure. We've all gotten caught up. It's really easy to do.
Especially at Brighton. There's a little influential mecca.
I mean, you do care so much about this industry we're in, and it's like, it's impossible not to care a little, but just trying your best to stay like true to like where your arrow is pointing is so critically important. Yeah. And it makes you unique. I feel like it makes more people drawn to you when you're just like being yourself.
Is that easy for you?
It's gotten easier. Yeah. Like, I feel like there's times that have been, like, like I felt maybe I shouldn't be myself, but I'm like, you know what, screw it. Like I'm just gonna fully be myself, and if people like me, great, and if they don't, that's also great. Like we're all just different people.
Totally.
And it's fine.
That's really cool. I like that. So, you know, what's the remainder of your season, the remainder of your year, and kind of, we touched a little bit about where you want to take it, but maybe we could specifically touch on what you would kind of like to see next in your riding. Where
I want to take it for the rest of this year is, I feel like I finally have gotten comfortable with like landing and taking off. Now I kind of want to push the boundaries of like, how far can I take it?
Yeah. Big cheese wedges.
Yeah.
Huge gap. I think Chad's maybe Chad's gap.
I'm ready. Let's go with it. I'm just kidding. Absolutely not. But I do want to do like a really big method, like really high. Like I want to do like huge method.
I was actually I was listening to something else. You were talking about that.
Yeah.
And have you built a hip in Flagstaff Gully?
No, but that's where I think I want to do it.
Because you're goofy, right?
It's perfect.
We should do that.
Yes.
We should totally do that this spring, because I've built hips there a couple times, and I was listening to like something else you were chatting about the method, and I was like, oh my god, like Flagstaff would be perfect. So
I'm very down.
We should plan on that. That'd be cool.
I'm very down.
You'd crush it. You can go as big as you want.
That's terrifying. I'm like,
there's actually an entire mountain you can get speed from. Yeah.
Great.
So you might land over by Snowbird if you'd want to, if that's what you're looking for.
In the parking lot.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. And then what about like in future seasons? Do you want to continue to focus on more creative backcountry style, or kind of continue to grow? It seems like a lot of people find objectives in more mountaineering, like backcountry splitboarding and things like that, and it's sometimes expected that it's like maybe that's where you'd want to go. Is that like the case for you?
Not really. I've been always like drawn to the freestyle aspect of snowboarding.
Yeah.
So I think for now I want to keep on that track of like trying to spin off things, trying to be like stylish with grabs.
Yeah.
But I really do want to go to Alaska someday. It's always been on my list since I've been a little kid. Like
you
should.
Yeah,
I really want to go.
Uh-huh.
Who is it? Like Mike Bassage? No, Jeremy Jones in like 91 Words for Snow hooked up to like this telephone pole in Alaska and would stole their electricity for his band. And
whoa, really? I haven't seen that.
I love that movie. That was like one of the movies that
Words for Snow.
Yeah, like influenced so much of my childhood. I'm like, I want to go to Alaska. Like, and who knows if it'll ever happen? But I can keep it on my little dream board.
I would say you seem to have a good way of mapping things out. So I'm sure if you want to go,
maybe not this year. Like I know like where I'm at, like mentally and like skill wise, I'm not quite there. And I want to keep building there, because when I go to Alaska, I want to feel like at least a little ready. I know you're never going to feel like ready for a lot of things, but
totally.
I want to feel at least like, all right, like I know how to push past this barrier.
Yeah, right. Like confident enough in your skill set to be like, okay, I'm scared, but I can trust myself.
Exactly.
You know?
Like little things like managing slough. I'm like, I don't feel fully confident in that yet. I got washed down to Couloir last year, and I was like,
oh, really?
I was like, that was horrifying. I can't imagine getting swept down a mountain in Alaska. That'd be so scary.
Oh man, yeah, that would be spooky. Alaska is a good place to explore fear. That's for sure. I haven't been able to like knock it out of the park there, but the little experience I've had is that you very easily can push your boundaries.
You're just like, oh, this is like a 10-foot drop, and you're like, oh, it's a 40-foot drop. Yep. You're like, hello.
Yeah, 100%. A little bit different than Brighton, but it's cool, right? With those risks can come a larger reward.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of want to transition into a sort of close things up here and ask a bit of a random question, a bit of a curveball question, if you will. It doesn't really have a whole ton to do with what we've been talking about. But I was curious if you, hypothetically, let's say you're splitboarding, you're hiking around in the backcountry, and you stumbled into a time machine. Where would you go, and why?
Oh, man. So, like, in my past, it can be anywhere.
Anywhere in history. You could let's even say it's like a teleportation device, too. You can go anywhere currently, future, or past.
Oh, my gosh. a part of me honestly wants to go to ancient Egypt and figure out what actually everything that was going on.
Okay.
Me and my sister have been like what actually happened.
What actually happened? I don't buy it.
I mean, like, how did the pyramids get built? Like, we need to see how this happened.
You know, I believe there's actually a docuseries on the History Channel that would cover that in full extent for you. It's called Ancient Aliens.
Yeah. We watched that for sure.
The guy that always has crazy hair with his hands up.
Yeah.
There's only one explanation for the pyramids. Aliens. Okay, Ancient Egypt. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah.
That's sick.
It's a really random one.
Yeah. Specific. It's random. I like it. Well, hey, this has been super fun. You know, thank you so much for coming on, for chatting, kind of catching up about snowboarding and mindset and ancient Egypt. And, you know, it's been really cool to see your sort of recent progression into the backcountry. And I'm just really excited to see where that takes you, and you know, I just want to see, would you have any thank yous you'd like to throw out?
Oh my gosh, too many thank yous. I guess thank you to all my friends that have helped me along the way. Thank you to all my sponsors, like past and current. Like, would not be here without any of you. Thanks Mom, thanks Dad, thanks Chris. Yeah, thank you Snowboarding.
Nice. That's a good one.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right, well, thank you to everyone who's able to tune in. We really appreciate it. And if you liked the show, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay tuned for more episodes. I'm Nils Mindnich. We'll see you next time.